These files were never meant to be public, but someone reopened them. This is the Dark Bureau. A mine is more than a cavern in the earth. It is a chasm through time, cutting into the marrow of a country's promise and peril. In South Africa, the ground is rich, but so too are the hidden networks that claim its wealth. Far below the sunlit surface, where drills echo and dust settles, minerals are extracted with the promise of national renewal. Yet above the surface, power and profit shift in shadows, steered by hands that leave no fingerprints. Ownership is fleeting. Fortunes change shape behind tinted glass, while entire neighbourhoods are defined or erased by currents invisible to the public eye. What might seem like advancement, gleaming towers, ambitious new developments, are sometimes only the outward trappings of a deeper, more obscure contest, conducted in boardrooms rather than open markets. Each ounce of gold, every load of platinum, is claimed by forces that make and unmake prosperity in ways most will never see. The signs are everywhere, yet they are easy to miss. Incomplete building sites, proposals that never bloom, entire communities racked by uncertainty as mines fall silent. Here, the true cost of extraction has as much to do with secrecy and control as it does with geology. Pull back the surface, and the official records offer only fragments of the full chronicle. Names lauded as captains of industry are often the proxies, not the architects. In this landscape, the boundaries separating legitimate enterprise, political authority, and illicit dealings interweave within corporate suites, contracts forged or rescinded within the span of a handshake. Corruption here is not about solitary bad actors, nor the work of any single criminal syndicate. What exists is a nested structure, networks of influence and mutual self-interest reinforced over years, robust enough to withstand not only regime changes, but also regulatory reform. Political transitions, new laws, and repeated promises of transparency do little to threaten what functions as a parallel authority, one which orchestrates public policy, allocation of mining rights, and public infrastructure like pieces on a chessboard. Institutional language invokes the national good. In practice, access is about proximity to the inner circle, a closed circuit deciding who gets opportunity and who must plead from the outside. When the reckoning arrives, it takes the shape of headlines, failed promises blazoned across newspapers, investigations sparking public fury. In mining towns, protest and resignation mingle. Unemployment replaces regular wages, polluted streams and crumbling clinics become a daily reality. The sense of betrayal is palpable and deeply personal. Yet these outcomes are rarely the result of simple market failure or chance. Far from accidental, the devastation is deliberately engineered. The rules themselves are manipulated, becoming tools for exclusion and enrichment by factions skilled in the art of regulatory evasion. What looks like the slow attrition of local industry is actually the output of an organised design, grown within the system and shielded from oversight. Its full cost is measured not just in lost revenue, but in the narrowing of futures, the fraying of social trust, the hollowing of communities meant to benefit most. To understand how we arrived at this crisis, it is necessary to dissect the architecture of modern mining, a nexus where resource wealth and the machinery of state converge. Minerals beneath South African soil are, in theory, held in trust by the people. Stewardship falls under public institutions, meant to guard against exploitation and foster national development. However, in practice, these mandates are porous. Loopholes within the regulatory framework and layers of bureaucratic discretion make it possible for gatekeepers, often appointed as political favours, to wield disproportionate power. The machinery includes everything from procurement contracts and exploration permits to the management of rail lines and ports. What should be a meritocratic process is undermined by arcane tender procedures riddled with opacity and contradiction. The rotation of officials, the use of interim appointments, and recurring legal challenges ensure that process favours those already entrenched within the network. At the operational core, syndicates, often indistinguishable from legitimate business alliances, strategically embed trusted operatives within state and parastatal procurement units. These insiders coordinate the awarding of contracts, filtering out unwelcome bids, and ensuring friendly entities control the most lucrative segments. Corruption becomes systematic. Bribes are obscured as consultancy fees, bonuses, or seemingly benign donations to affiliated charities. Regulatory audits can be postponed, diluted, or rerouted, leaving little trail and even less consequence. This sustained weakening of oversight is not accidental, but iteratively refined. Each cycle of capture further entrenches the system, with every complicit deal tightening the web. Offshoring becomes standard practice for laundering gains. Shadow financiers, individuals with access to foreign markets, and holding companies registered in secrecy-friendly jurisdictions keep the cash flows legal on paper, even as their origins are deliberately obfuscated. The perpetuation of this structure relies on a virtuous circle of concealment and mutual protection, where every new deal increases the leverage of those already inside, steadily foreclosing on genuine outside competition. Tracing the arc of state capture, we find a distinct inflection in the late 2000s. South Africa was undergoing high-profile policy changes designed to produce greater equity and redress the deep scars of apartheid. The Mining Charter and Black Economic Empowerment (BEE) quotas were intended as instruments of social justice. Yet, instead of democratising the sector, they inadvertently created a new class of politically connected intermediaries. The mechanics of fronting emerged. Genuine equity stakes were replaced by rented names, figureheads positioned to create the appearance of transformation. Ownership records filed with regulatory agencies obscured the true chain of control. Complex tender procedures, designed for fairness, instead provided endless opportunities for collusion. At the apex of this pyramidal system, select officials and business actors could determine market entry with little regard for competence or fairness, effectively transforming regulatory authority into private leverage. Major investigative commissions would eventually reveal how deeply the infection ran. The Zondo Commission and other high-level inquiries painstakingly assembled the pieces: emails, asset transfers, shadow appointments, shell companies receiving repeated state contracts. Whistleblower accounts disclosed how payments were channeled through layered offshore accounts and how strategic appointments placed client directors at every key node, particularly within state-owned enterprises central to the mining supply chain. The illicit flows were dizzyingly complex, touching multinational commodity firms headquartered in Europe and Asia, as well as smaller domestic conglomerates intricately woven into the state security establishment. Subpoenaed bank records outlined a choreography of legal and illegal. Legitimate dividends paid into one account, while under-the-table inducements travelled quietly elsewhere. In every case, oversight mechanisms were deliberately incapacitated. Auditing teams found files missing. Regulatory officers found themselves reassigned or dismissed as soon as lines of inquiry developed real potential. Public and institutional responses initially proved inadequate to the scale of the structure they faced. Early investigations were hobbled, evidence vanished or was tampered with, while key witnesses were subjected to public vilification or worse, covert intimidation campaigns. Family members of outspoken auditors and procurement monitors received threats. In the wake of document leaks, parastatal officials scrambled to justify billions in unaccounted-for development spending. Proposed reforms to licensing, audits and public tenders were met with swift legal counterattacks. A perpetual fog of injunctions and challenges that prevented systemic change. Attempts to enforce stricter accountability spurred resignations at senior levels, or simply produced any number of high-profile scapegoats, leaving the underlying structure intact. When international partners invoked treaties and threatened sanctions, contracts were quietly dissolved, only to reappear through more complex arrangements. Each effort to break the circle forced the system to become more sophisticated, adapting faster as it encountered resistance. The costs of this deeply entrenched corruption are cumulative and harrowing. Entire communities once built on stable mining revenue and planned public investment are left to battle environmental fallout and resource scarcity. Residents find themselves without clean water as riverbeds are polluted, clinics decay for lack of funding, and schools collapse under unrealised bursary programs. Youth unemployment rises as the promise of skills development is voided by empty paperwork. National budgets are stretched thin, not only by direct revenue lost to fraud, but by the compounding underdevelopment it makes permanent. As public institutions are hollowed out by the capture of their leadership and mandate, the very idea of accountability is corroded. Public cynicism breeds apathy or extremism, opening new space for destabilising forces in politics and civil society. The region's stability is compromised. Neighbouring economies struggle to insulate themselves from cross-border criminal networks that piggyback on and reinforce the same structures of concealment. A crucial turn occurred when the work of commissions, journalists, and whistleblowers forced the true scale of state capture onto the national stage. Testimony was harrowing in its detail. Procurement fraud mapped out as a deliberate, cartel-like operation. Former insiders revealing the intricate ballet of bribes, threats, and revolving door appointments that spanned local councils up to the national cabinet. The role of international actors was exposed as more than passivity. Commodity traders, multinational banks, and foreign intermediaries were complicit in providing sanctuary for laundered profits and offering plausible deniability to those who engineered the system. The exposure represented a seismic blow to public confidence and forced the government to embark on overhauling entire policy frameworks. Specialised investigative units were established. Anti-corruption courts tried the first significant cases, and landmark convictions, including the freezing and reclamation of central assets, were achieved, even if still rare. International cooperation improved, and domestic civil society found new influence in driving transparency reforms. Yet even these advances have not eradicated the root system. The most powerful actors continue to shift strategies, employing legal appeals that delay justice, manipulating media narratives, and leveraging global financial networks to hide assets. Reforms remain fragile, often attacked or simply undermined from within. Still, persistent pressure from civil society, courageous reporting from investigative journalists, and ongoing institutional renewal, backed by a galvanised public, have forced real concessions for the first time in decades. Such efforts carry significant personal risk. Many reformers have faced not only professional exile, but dangerous reprisals. The stakes could not be higher. What hangs in the balance is whether South Africa's mineral endowment, a birthright for millions, can ever be retrieved from the predations of private networks, or if it will remain locked beneath layers of secrecy and manipulation. No single law, commission, or exposed scandal can fully unwind a structure as complex and deeply anchored as this one. But the tide of recent accountability marks both a warning and an opening. Each layer of exposure, every act of whistleblowing, hard-won audit, or courtroom victory, adds to a growing public record, making secrecy more costly and reminding all players that, given time and tenacity, power is never truly invisible forever.